great to have you on the program.
I'm delighted to be with you. Thank you for having me.
You have been busy. I know you just said that you returned from Mexico with Congressman Issa after being there over the weekend to talk with Mexico about this whole scandal involving Fast and Furious and the ATF. Tell us how things went.
Well, we had kind of a couple of purposes of our trip. They, as you know, are fighting a war against the drug cartels, and we wanted to provide support in every way that we can manifest it for their efforts. But obviously Fast and Furious was part of the trip also. Mexico, the authorities that we met with are gracious enough to reserve judgment until the investigation is complete. Obviously, Mexico has very different gun laws than the United States. They don't have a Second Amendment, and if you're not in law enforcement or the military, it's illegal for you to possess a firearm in Mexico. So the notion that we would have an undercover operation, if that's the right term, that resulted in guns going to a country where it is per se illegal to possess them, they showed more restraint than I think the United States would have shown if the situation had been reversed. I can tell you that.
Well, because I know a big concern of the agents, they said their worst nightmares come true, that people have been killed with guns linked to Fast and Furious. You had Border Patrol Agent Brian Terry. You now have a New Mexican attorney, a very well-known one, the guns linked again to Fast and Furious. Were they able to give you any serial numbers of these guns so you could check it out? I know that was something Congressman Issa was interested in getting.
We spent a lot of time talking about E-Trace, and I don't want to bore your listeners with the cloud technology as opposed to other kinds of computer technology. But one of the questions that I have not had answered that I think is the starting point is, when did United States officials either in Mexico or the United States realize that Fast and Furious guns had crossed the border? Give me the date where we realized for the first time these guns, we had lost control of the guns and that they were going to Mexico. I have not gotten an answer to that question yet, but as soon as you have actual or really even constructive knowledge, you should have shut down the investigation. I personally think the investigation was ill-conceived from the beginning. Mm-hmm. The other question that I asked in the committee hearing in D.C. is, even if it had worked, in quotes, how was it going to work? I never understood what the end game was. If you're trying to get guns connected to straw purchasers in the United States to the Mexican cartel, you don't need an investigation for that. We already know it's happening. So are you going to extradite cartel leaders to U.S. District Court for a lying and buying case? Because you don't get any time for that. Even assuming you could get an indictment, an extradition, and a conviction, you're not getting any time for that. There's no D in ATF, so you can't necessarily go after the cartels for the drug trafficking without having an OCDETF case that involved DEA and the FBI. I think this investigation has ATF in a curious position. There are ATF agents who will acknowledge publicly and privately this was an ill-conceived investigation. They would never have done it.
And you know, I was going to ask you, because after what you've heard, the testimony, do you ever really think there was a plan to really track these guns? I mean, even Agent Forcelli testified, once a gun went to Mexico, that case was dead. And you brought up the very important point about proffers, which you were, I mean, when you said, did they ever use them? And they said that they weren't used by the U.S. attorneys in Phoenix. You were shocked to hear that.
I'm still shocked to hear it. There are the traditional law enforcement investigative techniques that are tried and true. We would never, ever let drugs walk. And I realize guns are not inherently illegal, but nonetheless, the analogy is appropriate. You know these are straw purchasers. Either do a car stop and flip them, do a proffer, flip them on their higher-ups, do a historical case, do search warrants where you find these Fast and Furious guns in the homes of the non-straw purchasers. There are lots of ways to do it other than just calling off surveillance, letting the guns go, because necessarily you would have had to wait until either a crime was committed or the Mexican authorities did a search warrant The Mexican authorities didn't know about the investigation. So how would they have known what to look for?
Yeah, I mean, that brings it right back. So was this really about, trying to take down a major drug cartel, or was this about being able to drive up the number of guns, traced to the U.S.? Because even Congressman Issa said, was this about a political decision, meeting a political goal? What do you think about that?
Well, I'm in a tough spot. I've spent 16 years working with law enforcement, and I judge law enforcement based on my experience with the agents in the state and federal system that I worked with. And these are some of the best, most dedicated, hardest working folks. I can tell you this investigation never, ever would have gotten off the ground in the District of South Carolina. But it never would have been. It never would have been brought up. I've never worked with an ATF agent. We had some cases where guns that we knew about that were not straw purchasers. We just knew that somebody had guns, and there was a panic over guns, drugs, or money getting out of our control. Just an absolute panic. The notion that you could do straw purchases and those guns be headed to Mexico, and you not be allowed to do a car stop, you not be allowed to do an interdiction, you just be told to let it walk. At some point, I need the author of this plan to come explain to me, what were you thinking? How would this ever have worked?
Well,
I haven't gotten that explanation.
Yeah, and you said the author. We're not sure who that is, but you guys sure are digging to find out. And there was a lot of talk last week that acting director Ken Melson was on his way out. Now Melson says he ain't going down easy. He doesn't want to be the fall guy. He also wants to testify before the Oversight Committee. He hasn't been given his walking papers yet by the DOJ. They are the ones, I guess, when he's under DOJ to give him approval to testify. Do you think that's part of the reason he hasn't been let go yet, because they don't want him up there testifying?
I don't know. I've got a whopping 6 months experience in Congress, so I can work my way around a courtroom better than I can a subcommittee hearing room. I know this. What happened in Mexico only intensified our desire for answers. There were more questions that arose than we had answers to our questions.
You mean in your recent meeting?
Yeah, 24 hours ago, 36 hours ago.
Yeah.
And when the DOJ witness came before Oversight, I left with more questions than I had answers. Jason Shavitz did a wonderful job of showing the redactions and the conflicting, shall we say, testimony with respect to when the administration knew about this program. Anyone who knows Darrell Issa knows he is a tenacious, persistent legislator. And we're going to find out what happened. They can do it the hard way or they can do it the easy way. We're going to find out who approved it, what were they thinking, and how high up it went.
But if DOJ is going to have control over who testifies and what they can say, I mean, Ronald Weich was proof. They didn't say anything. They couldn't answer anything. All we heard was, I can't answer that. I don't know. I mean, how are you going to get to the bottom of it?
Mr. Issa has subpoena power. You don't like to think that you have to subpoena witnesses to come. Oversight's a core function of Congress. You shouldn't have to issue a legal process to get someone to show up. But Mr. Issa has proven he is willing to do it. Yeah. And if the head of ATF wants to come and testify, this notion that you're going to jeopardize ongoing prosecutions is fallacious. Yes. These are lying and buying prosecutions in the United States where, the maximum you can get is 10 years, and nobody ever gets that. And if that analogy holds true, then there's going to be an appeal and then a habeas proceeding. So you can slow walk this thing out for the next 4 to 6 years, which is completely unacceptable. So hiding behind ongoing prosecutions, I would never do anything to jeopardize a conviction. So I'm not asking about the cases specifically. I'm asking who came up with this idea? How was it supposed to succeed? Who knew that the guns were getting into Mexico? What did you do about it? One of my concerns is that ATF in Mexico knew nothing about this investigation.
Right, and the bottom line is...
Let's assume that a gun was recovered, a Fast and Furious gun was recovered. Was there anything in the database to indicate, look, this is a gun we're watching? Was it flagged somehow?
Yeah. The bottom line is, was they really plan to trace this, or was this just about politics, which was something ISA brought up. What do you think was the most beneficial thing to come out of the meetings that you had in Mexico? Because I know when Congressman Issa talked to us, he said it was about trust, about restoring our trust, because right now they don't trust us. What do you think was the most beneficial thing to come out?
If they do not like the United States, then they are some of the best actors and actresses that I have ever been around. There seems to be a genuine desire to partner with us, specifically in fighting the cartels. We watched them do mock car stops, mock building extrications. We watched their police force essentially go through a half day's worth of exercises. And I think what we were continually told is how much it meant to them that we would show up on a weekend, watch their exercises, hear their concerns. They're going through, as you know, a tremendous judicial and prosecutorial reform in Mexico, because you can have all the law enforcement you want. You can make good cases. And that is one thing I brought up to ATF and DEA in Mexico. They were showing me pictures of seizures. Okay, that's great. What happened? Show me the prison sentences. I'm not interested in seizures. I want to know that somebody was held accountable for it. So they are trying to reform. I think they've done a reasonable job with respect to law enforcement. They're now trying to reform the judicial and prosecutorial functions, and they so deeply desire to continue a partnership with our country. I think that that they are more understanding about what may have happened than we would have been had Mexico or Canada done an investigation like this that wound up killing our citizens. There would be zero understanding on our behalf.
All righty. Well, thanks for all you do. You think Nelson's going to be out anytime soon?
I'm not a good prognosticator. I can tell you this. If he wants to come before Congress and lay out his side of the story, now would be a very good time to do it. And if he cares about the reputation of the women and men in ATF, somebody's going to have to provide us answers, and it's going to have to be somebody in a position of leadership, and the sooner the better.